Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I am back with another video. So this one I actually made several weeks ago. I'm using the color layering dragonfly from Hero Arts. And I didn't really realize that I was just going to play around basically. And so I had stamped all of this out before I turned on my camera. And then I decided that I wanted to film it. So I just used the Hero Arts black dye ink and my Misty to stamp out my dragonfly and then stamp out all of my little lotus flowers, which are super pretty. I'm working on Canson watercolor paper, and this was back when I was on my Zig Clean Color Marker kick. So here I wanted to put them on some lily pads, and I am just going in and very loosely, and I do mean very loosely here, people, I'm drawing in some lily pad shapes underneath my flowers. I kind of wanted it to look like a aerial view of this dragonfly flying over this pond that has all these lily pads in it. So I started with my lightest color, which was the yellow, and then I added in some darker green where I wanted it to be the darkest, and then I'm kind of going to let them meet in the middle. So once I had all those drawn out, and I did draw some just freehand whatever's lily pads with no with no flowers underneath the dragonfly just to fill that in. And then I'm using a number 2 round brush, picking up some water, and I'm starting where the color is the lightest. So where the color is the lightest, I'm putting down the water and then pulling that into the dark green. In order to make them mesh a little bit better, I'm using a in-between color that I've just kind of scribbled on my Ranger craft mat. Or you could use an acrylic block, like just as long as it's a non-porous surface, you can pretty much use it as a palette. And then I'm just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again for all of these lily pads. I really liked the contrast of like the brighter green with the pink and then the dark blue, which you'll see when we get there to doing the water portion. I just thought it was really, really pretty, and I honestly just wanted to sit down and kind of play around. It wasn't for an assignment or a deadline or anything like that, and that's probably why it's taken me so long to get it up. I had all these other things. You guys know, you have lives, you have things going on in your life just like I do, and so it's taken me a hot minute to kind of get this together because I didn't have a fire under my little tushy to get it done. But it was really, really fun to make. And since I use Copics all the time, doing something like this is kind of an exercise in like kind of stretching myself or stretching my creativity, because I want to default back to those Copics because it's the medium I'm the most comfortable with. But if I never practice with anything else, I'm not going to get any better with that either. So just really kind of trying to get out of my comfort zone and play with some colors and just have a good time. So parts of this video will be sped up or cut out because I am honestly, guys, doing the same thing over and over again. Here, I wanted to just show you how I was coloring the lily pads that had no flowers on them. So I was just putting down the darkest in the center and then that mid-tone in the middle, and then again starting in the yellow area and then bringing that into the green. Because if you watch my videos, you've heard me say this before about watercolors or watercolor pens, markers, whatever you want to call them, that if you start where it is the darkest and then you pull it out, it's going to be, you're just going to have one tone pretty much. You're not going to have any variation because that darker color will cover up everything else. Here, I wanted to give myself a little bit of dimension, so I'm going back in and adding kind of a drop shadow with the darkest green. And then at first I was going to leave this, and then it started to look a little bit, I guess, kind of like cartoony. And so I did decide to go back in and blend that out with the paintbrush. And I'm using minimal water through all of this. Just not a ton of water at all. And that's really the key to watercolor, is controlling the amount of water that you're using. If you want these to blend out perfectly with no hard lines, no what we call like blooms, then you're going to want to you're either going to want to put in the darker color while it is wet. So I would recommend scribbling it off on your craft mat and then dropping in some more of the dark color, or you're going to want to wet the entire area and then go to where the color is darkest if you've colored it down like I have here. I like those blooms and I kind of like those hard edges. I feel like it adds a lot of variation to the painting. So I'm not real particular about it. When I go back in and blend it, I try to put down some water so that there is somewhere for the pigment to flow, but I'm not real particular about whether or not it covers the entire area that I am painting. And you'll see that in the end result where, there's areas that have dried that weren't, they didn't blend in with the first layer of color. Now, all of this is dry because when you're watercoloring, you want to make sure you're not working in two areas next to each other that are wet. So I let all of the lily pads dry. And now I'm going to go in with a couple of different blues. So when you're outlining this, it doesn't need to be right up next to your flowers or right up next to your lily pads. I'm just trying to put down some color in between so that when I go in with the paintbrush, I've got something to move around. And the reason it doesn't have to be right up next to it is because you can do that part with your paintbrush. You don't have to start there. And then for any areas that there was kind of like a large block without any color, I just did a little scribble of this dark blue here so that there would be something. It wouldn't be super light in that area. And so I put down this like navy blue, and then I think the next one you'll see, because now we're speeding up, is like a Prussian blue. And then the last one is the lighter. It's not, it's like a true blue color, but it is the lightest one I used here, and I think it's called Cobalt. But as always, I'll have everything linked. And this is going to look really funny until we start to add the water, and then you can see what like a cool effect that you get, and it really does start to look like moving water. So I recommend starting in smaller areas so that way you can kind of get all of those moved around and brought out so that there aren't those hard edges, because I didn't really want the hard edges in my background. It's all supposed to be one body of water, so I wasn't looking for any kind of separation. So I'm trying to like complete one section and then move on to a section that is next to that so that they're still fluid, you know what I mean? Like everything's still wet and they'll go together. And then this is probably the part where I used the most water. And I did that. I would drop it like in the lighter areas and then bring it out to the darker parts, because again, I want to conserve the lighter of the colors that I have. I wasn't looking to go crazy dark all over it. If I wanted that, then I would have just used that one navy blue color. I want some variation so that it looks like the water is flowing or has some movement to it underneath it. So this is a long one. This is a good long video because watercoloring just takes so long. And it always seems, I don't know if you guys have this problem, but it always seems like when I need to get something done, like whatever it is, whatever the something is, and I have no idea what's happening here. I've just apparently given myself this nice long break in between. I apologize, but we're already to the voiceover portion of this video and I'm not re-editing it. That's facts of life, guys. So you'll have to have dead air for however long it took me to get my act together. I was probably texting, honestly. But anyway, you guys can tell me if this happens to you or not. Whenever I have to get something done, and I need to get it done quickly and knock it out and just move on to the next thing in my life, whatever that next thing is, that's always when my idea for a card is watercolor, because watercolor takes the longest for me. So if I am like Copic coloring a card, not like a huge, big, long, involved scene, which I have a tendency to do, but just if it's just like, one or two cute little images or whatever, I could probably, if I was rushing and totally uninterrupted, which let's be real, I have a dog and a small child, so that pretty much never happens. But if it did happen, if like, I don't know, there was a full moon and an eclipse and lightning was striking all at the same time and I got 20 minutes that were uninterrupted to myself, I could knock out a Copic card in about 20-25 minutes. For this card, I think by the time I was done, I think I had about an hour and a half to 2 hours worth of footage. which apparently also included the amount of time that I was texting and not really paying any attention. It probably was about 2 hours for me. Now, that's not like I'm not mad about it because it's super good fun. Oh, we had to go to the card for a second. So one of the things that I really wanted to do with this dragonfly was try to kind of recreate that iridescent look that they have on their wings. So here I've put down a little bit of light blue, more toward like where the wing attaches to the body. And then I've scribbled down a couple of other colors. I'm using a pretty good amount of water here because I don't want them to be super bright. I want the colors to be more subtle. So I'm using that blue that I already put down, and then a yellow, a pink, and a purple. I did put green down there, but I didn't end up really using it. Just because I was letting the colors kind of mix and make their own. So I really actually like the way that this came out. Later on, I'm not going to super love it, but that was my own fault, and we'll get there when we get there. But anyway, so I really wanted to kind of create that look, that iridescent rainbow look that insects, not just dragonflies, but they have to their wings when they're out in the sunlight. So that's what I am doing there, and then I will move on to the flowers. Now, one thing to keep in mind is with watercolor, everything kind of dries back a little bit lighter than when you originally put it down. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're adding to your painting, especially like this one with the wings there. I didn't want it to be crazy bright, but I also didn't want it to be non-existent. So here, again, I told you I was just playing. So I started with a pale pink, because Lotus flowers, when I Googled them and looked at their images, they have a couple of different color options. And so I wanted to do the ones that were pink into white, and then the ones that were like a pinkish purple color. So I would have a little bit of variation because I get a lot going on in this scene. So here I started with the lightest pink color, and I did it the same way that I colored the other things. I put the marker down to the paper where I wanted it to be the darkest, and then I'm going in there with minimal water and bringing it out. Now, if you've watched some of my earlier watercoloring videos, you'll notice that I tell you after you pick up the water to blot off your brush, just the base of your bristles, so you have what they call a damp or a thirsty brush. Because I have been practicing so much, I can pretty much just put my paintbrush in the water and come up with the exact amount of water that I need. So even though, and that isn't always true, like if you see my hand move off of the screen, like toward the bottom, it's because I have a paper towel right there and I'm blotting. So that light pink didn't really give me a whole lot of dimension. So you've heard me say before, you can shade with grays. So I decided, since it was pink into white, I was going to try to shade with grays. The gray that I chose was too light, and it didn't really add any dimension to it. And I was a little bit scared to go in with a darker gray and completely lose any of the pink that I had. So once I'm done doing this, I'm actually going to use that same bright pink you'll see me use for the bigger flowers, but I'm going to use a very, very, very minimal amount. Because Zig Clean Color Markers just love the water. They love to run and to spread, and they're very, very vibrant, which is why I like them. Here I kept getting some blue on my petal just because I guess must have painted over it. And so I'm getting it wet and then picking up that color so there isn't blue on my petal because, it's a pink flower. So here you can see just how very small the amounts are that I'm putting in. You can almost barely see it on the camera. Because I know that when I add water to it, it's going to become much bolder and much brighter. This did work for me. This gave me a little bit more dimension that I was looking for in the pink to white flower. But I would just caution you to add very, very, very little. You can always add more. And watercolor is forgiving. So if you put down the pink and it gets crazy and just runs all over the place, just get a paper towel and blot it up, guys. Totally salvageable, I promise. If you let it dry though, then it's a little bit more difficult to get it off the paper, so you kind of want to catch it right away. So anywho, back to just my general life ramblings, because, well, that's how we roll here. Trying to think of what's been so we talked about create pretty much. I think we've covered all the create stories there. Oh my god. We were talking about my coffee and how I couldn't get any coffee. And then a whole bunch of you, which were super, super nice, told me all of these coffee places. And some of you offered to bring me coffee, which was amazing. I actually had Kelly, which was, I think, before I went to create, sent me a message on Instagram and asked me for my email, which I'm pretty giving with. You can also find it on my blog, though I think it's difficult to find there, honestly, because a lot of times people say that they can't find it. But anyway, it is there. But so she sent me an email with a Dunkin' Donuts gift card, which was super nice of her. Just like as a thank you for what, I don't know, I guess making these videos that I love to make. So she thanked me for doing something that I love to do, which is really very, very nice of her. But anyway, so I had gone to Dunkin'. I was just having a day, okay? Like sometimes you just have a day where like everything goes wrong, and I was so tired and I didn't get any sleep, and I had all of these things that were due, and work was really overwhelming. We were just had a busier night, and busier day. I was day shift that day. And so my mother very graciously allowed me to come home and take a nap, which I was super excited about because, you know, I survive on naps. So I came home and grabbed a nap and was on my way to my mom and dad's, and I was going to have dinner there. Well, I usually end up leaving there a little bit later because I love my family. I love my family. I could not survive my life without my parents. They help me so very much. But sometimes getting out of the house in a timely fashion is a little bit tricky. And so usually I get out of there a little bit later, and so I'm trying to get Peanut home and get him in the tub and get him into bed on time and all that. So I don't usually have time to stop for coffee, even though I know I'm going to be up for another, 3-4 hours after he goes to bed. So I was stopping on my way to my parents' house because I knew I was going to be there for dinner. So I was just going to stop and grab a coffee. So on my way, stop there. It's just me in the line. So I pay the kid, whatever, 16-year-old kid who's working for, pocket change at Dunkin', pay him my money, and he hands me my coffee. And as I am bringing it around, I'm going to put it in the cup holder. And as I'm going to set it down, the lid completely comes off. The coffee drops into my lap, right in between, like, my console and my right leg. And I had ordered a large, so just like 20 ounces of coffee goes spilling all over the place. Thankfully, it was not super hot. I mean, it was warm. It was definitely it was like Cleveland in the summer, not Florida in the summer. So it wasn't like scalding, thankfully, because the whole thing just dumped right in my lap. So all over my coat and my pants, the console, and like I look up, and this poor young man who is spending his evenings working at Dunkin' Donuts, just has his hands at his temples, and he's just staring at me like he cannot even believe what has just occurred. And I was like, hey, can I maybe get some napkins, please? And he was like, oh yeah, I'm so sorry. He's like, here, hand the cup back to me, like I'll make you a new coffee, which was very nice of him. And so I was trying to blot it up with some napkins, which I don't know if if you're not a fast food person or a Dunkin' Donuts person, like typically their napkins are the equivalent of notebook paper. Like they're not terribly absorbent. They basically turn into like wet tissue the moment that you get any sort of moisture on them. So I'm pretty much trying to blot up all of his coffee with the equivalent of like used toilet paper. It was not working very well. He gives me my new coffee, and at this point I'm just laughing because it's just like, it's that kind of day where if you didn't laugh, you'd cry. And so I call my mom and I'm like, listen, this is my situation. I got to go back home because I need new pants and I got to clean this mess up. So I came back home and emptied out my pockets of my coat, pants, the whole deal and then I took a large towel outside to try to absorb as much of the coffee as I could. And then so that towel went all into the washer. I cleaned myself up, changed, and then I had to sit on a towel in order to get to my parents because it was still pretty damp in the car. But usually I get a large coffee with double cream and double sugar. That's usually my go-to. And I know there's some of you right now cringing at the amount of cream and sugar that I put in my coffee. It's okay. I'm okay with it. You be okay with it. But actually that time I had gotten cream and caramel swirl, which is also another one I would highly recommend. It's very delicious. Not as sweet as I normally get it, but the caramel makes up for it. But anyway, so like the next, I don't know, probably a week and a half, my car just smelled like a delicious caramel coffee. So clearly, once the weather breaks completely, I'm going to have to go get that cleaned, because I can't just, have all that cream and sugar and whatever just sitting in my car seat, because it's probably get nasty. Yeah, so that was fun. These are the days of my life. Definitely could have been worse, though. I mean, it's not super fun, but it could have been worse. The coffee could have been hot. I could have actually got hurt. He could have not given me a new coffee, which would have been a travesty. So yeah, back to the card. So the inside centers, Zigs work with water, but they also work with themselves. Like you can use a lighter color to blend out a darker color. And that's what I'm going to do here with the inside. I put down a little bit of brown. Again, a little goes a long way. And then I'm going to go in with a yellow and just kind of stretch that brown out into the little inside petals that the Lotus has, because these areas are very small. I didn't really feel the need to try to go in there with a paintbrush and get crazy when I could just do it with the marker. Plus, it makes the centers a little bit bolder because you haven't mixed the pigment with water. I added just a little bit of brown to the center of the flower, and then I'm going over that with the yellow as well, just to get a little bit of differentiation. And then I'm going to cut to la 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 la. We colored all of these things. I'm going to use a gray to shade the body of my dragonfly. And then I am going to kind of drag that out with just a very minimal amount of water. The right-hand side was a little bit too light for me, so I'm going to add in just a little bit more of that gray. It's like a medium gray, just to shade the body. And then here is where I fall back to my tendencies. So I really loved the dragonfly, and I love the way the wings came out, but it didn't have enough dimension for me. So I am going to use just a couple of gray markers just to get a little bit of dimension through the wings. So just C5, C3, and C1, just kind of blend that out. And honestly, y'all, I should have stopped here. I should have just stopped. But I didn't, because I wanted it to have some shimmer. My apologies if you can hear some squeaking in the background. Peanut is playing with the dog. But anyway, so I'm going to outline all of this because that's just how I roll. I like a bold black outline. So I am going to go in and outline the dragonfly and the flowers. And then I did use a white gel pen to just add a couple little dots inside the center of the flowers for the lotuses. I don't know. I learned this before when we were talking about, what was it? I can't remember what the word was, and I couldn't remember if it was a like if it was syllabus or syllabi, you know what I'm talking about, how it ends in I if it's a plural. And then I learned it was only words that had a root word in Latin. So anyway, I'm going over this with clear wing Castella, and I'm going over it with the white. Now clearly you can see I have a situation here. I absorbed it with my paper towel and then just kind of did my best to spread it out. That was my that was my wonderful son using my supplies, and he just squeezed it way too hard. But when you use the white, it dries white, not just clear. And so I thought that would be a fun way to get some shimmer and kind of make those colors less obvious. I really, really wish I wouldn't have done that. I really wish I would have just went with the clear. But I didn't, and I don't know that there's a way to remove it. So lesson learned, it is what it is. I'm not going to use the white for this particular technique in the future. I will just leave them, and add the glitters with the clear. So I just used this one set, this dragonfly set, and in it there's a couple of different sentiments, and this one says "to a wonderful friend," which I thought would be super cute. So I have a black piece of Simon Says stamped cardstock here, and then I treated that with my embossing bag. I'm going to stamp it down in Versamark ink, and then just use some white embossing powder to do that. And I decided I wanted to make a label, but I didn't want it to be just a label. I didn't want just like a random square in the middle. So I decided that I was going to kind of attach it to the side of the card as like an anchor point, which did mean I had to cover up some of my flowers, but I think ultimately it's okay. So I trimmed this down to fit the size of my sentiment. I'm going to pop this up on some foam tape, and I wasn't sure how far in I wanted to go with it, which is why I still have like the handle on the side. But once I was happy with where it was at, I'm just going to flip it over and trim off the extra on the back. And then that's really it. That's pretty much the whole card. So it was a lot of fun. I think the Zig Clean Color Markers really got the look of the water that I was looking for, and I love that vibrant pink. That pink is just my favorite. So I will be back soon, I'm sure, because I have so many videos on my list of things to do. And thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.